My stepmother kicked me out at 18, claiming my father left me nothing. Little did she know the house was never his to give. My name is Leo. I am 27 years old. For the last 9 years, I've been living in a state of self-imposed exile, working 3 jobs, sleeping in my car, and eventually clawing my way into a stable life as a structural engineer. I did this because on my 18th birthday, exactly 2 weeks after my father's funeral, my stepmother, Diane, handed me a trash bag with my clothes and told me to leave. "Your father left everything to me and your stepbrothers," she said with a cold, triumphant smirk. "There's no room for dead weight here." I believed her. I was grieving, broken, and young. I assumed my father, who had been under her thumb for a decade, had simply forgotten about me in his final days. But last month, a letter arrived from a law firm I hadn't heard from in years. It turns out Diane made a fatal mistake. She assumed that because she married my father, she owned everything he touched. She forgot about my grandmother, Eleanor. And Eleanor was a woman who saw through people like Diane before they even opened their mouths. Here is the story of how I discovered I was the legal owner of the mansion my stepmother has been living in for free, and how I reclaimed my legacy. My mother passed away when I was 7. It was just me and my dad, Arthur, for a long time. Then came Diane. She was grieving a divorce of her own, looking like a polished saint. She brought her 2 sons, Cody and Kyle. They were my age, but they were treated like royalty while I was shifted to the small basement room. My grandmother, Eleanor, my dad's mother, hated Diane from day one. "Arthur," she would say at Sunday dinners, "that woman doesn't love you. She loves the zip code we live in." My father was a kind but weak man. He wanted peace at any price. When Eleanor died when I was 15, Diane tried to seize her jewelry and her bank accounts immediately. But Eleanor was a shark. She had a private meeting with her lawyers months before she passed. At the funeral, the will was read. Eleanor left my father a life estate in the family home, a massive historic Victorian property, and some cash. Diane was furious because the big money was nowhere to be found. She assumed Eleanor had spent it all. For the next 3 years, Diane made my life a living hell. I was the maid, the gardener, and the punching bag. When my father died of a sudden heart attack when I was 18, I was devastated. The day after the funeral, Diane claimed the will said everything went to her. I didn't ask to see it, I just left. Fast forward 9 years. I am a successful engineer. I have my own life. The letter from Sterling & Associates arrived. "Dear Mr. Miller, regarding the trust of Eleanor Miller, the 10-year holding period has concluded. As the primary renderman, we require your presence for the transfer of the deed." I met with the lawyer, a man who had known my grandmother for 40 years. "Leo," he said, smiling, "your grandmother knew your father was weak. She knew Diane was a gold digger. So she structured her will very specifically." He explained the life estate. My father didn't own the house. He was allowed to live there for his lifetime. Upon his death, the house was to be held in a trust for exactly 9 years, until I was 27. During those 9 years, the trust would pay the property taxes using a secret investment fund Eleanor had set up. Diane had been living there because the trust allowed immediate family to reside there until the transfer period ended. But the transfer period was over. The house, worth $2.8 million today, was mine. The secret fund? It still had $400,000 in it. All mine. And there was a specific clause. If the current occupants have caused significant damage or failed to maintain the property, the owner has the right to immediate eviction and suit for damages. I didn't call Diane. I drove to the house. The beautiful Victorian was in shambles. The garden Eleanor loved was a field of weeds. There were rusted cars in the driveway. I walked up to the door and knocked. Kyle, my stepbrother, answered. He was 27 now, still living at home, smelling like cheap beer and bad decisions. "Yeah, we don't want any," he said, trying to close the door. "I'm here to see Diane," I said, stepping into the frame. He froze. "Leo? What the hell are you doing here? Mom told you never to come back." "It's a free country, Kyle. Move." I walked into the foyer. It smelled of cigarette smoke and neglect.
Diane came down the stairs, looking older, her face tight with Botox. "Leo, how dare you show up here? I told you years ago you have nothing here." "Actually, Diane," I said, holding up the new deed, "I have everything."
I handed her the papers. She laughed at first. "This is fake. I'm the widow. I own this house." "No, Diane. Dad had a life estate. He couldn't leave you a house he didn't own. You've been a guest of my grandmother's trust for 9 years, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, your reservation is canceled." She read the papers. Her face went from white to red to a sickly purple. "You can't do this. I have nowhere to go. Cody and Kyle live here." "Not my problem," I said. "You have 48 hours to vacate. I've already filed the paperwork with the sheriff." "I'll sue you," she screamed. "With what money, Diane? I know you've spent every cent of Dad's life insurance. And by the way, I'm suing you." I pointed to the holes in the drywall and the stained carpets. "My grandmother's will states that if you neglected the property, you owe the trust for repairs. My forensic accountant is already calculating the cost. It looks like you owe me about $150,000. The next 2 days were a whirlwind. Diane tried to call my relatives, telling me I was a monster. But the relatives had all been blocked by her years ago, so no one listened. She tried to sell the antique furniture. I arrived with 2 off-duty police officers I hired for security. "If one more piece of furniture leaves this house, you're going to jail for grand larceny," I told her. Cody tried to get aggressive. He's a big guy, but he's soft. I stood my ground. "Try it, Cody. I'd love to add an assault charge to your record." He backed down. On the final morning, the sheriff arrived. Diane was sitting on the porch, surrounded by trash bags, just like I was 9 years ago. "You're a monster, Leo," she wept. "Eleanor was a witch." "Eleanor was a visionary," I corrected her. "She knew exactly who you were." As they loaded their junk into a U-Haul, I walked through the house. It was painful to see the neglect, but I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since I was 7. I didn't sell the house. I spent the next year restoring it. Every dollar of that $400,000 secret fund went into the wood, the glass, and the garden. I found a hidden compartment in Eleanor's old desk. Inside was a letter addressed to me, dated 10 years ago. "My dearest Leo, if you were reading this, you were a man. I knew Diane would try to erase you. I couldn't stop your father from being a fool, but I could make sure you had a foundation to build on. Use this house to be the man your mother wanted you to be. Don't let bitterness be the wallpaper of your life. With love, Eleanor." I cried for the first time in a decade. Diane tried to sue for a widow's share of the house. The judge took one look at Eleanor's ironclad trust and dismissed the case in 10 minutes. Because Diane had no money for a lawyer, she had to represent herself. It was a disaster. Last I heard, she and her sons are living in a 2-bedroom trailer. Kyle was arrested for some petty theft, and Cody is working at a car wash. I don't hate them anymore. I don't have the energy for it. I recently got married. We had the wedding in the backyard, under the old oak tree Eleanor used to sit under. When I look at my wife and our life, I realize that the trash bag Diane gave me at 18 was the best gift I ever got. It forced me to become someone she could never destroy. The dead weight finally came home, and this time, he's staying.